So if Kelly from Apple is in the audience, I'm going to start with a personal story. I've had an awesome 28-year career in advertising and marketing. I've had my ups and downs, we've all had them. But I always thought I had the best job no matter what I was doing. I was close to the creative product, at Hill Holiday, at Modernista, and at Bank of America. And then 2 years ago, we had a reorganization. The emotion is from Leslie's introduction. We had a reorganization, and I was layered. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why. And I was living in this question of why did this happen to me? What's not working for me anymore? And I went to my new boss and my former boss, who's now my boss again. And I said I wanted to take a certificate class in positive psychology. And they supported that, and I went away. I did a year-long class. It's a week at the beginning, an immersion, a week at the end, and a lot of online learning in between. And I call it my year of whittling. And the first thing you learn in positive psychology is how to ask a different question. Instead of what's not working, instead of living in that question, because when you live in the question of what's not working, nothing works. When you live in the question of why am I so busy, you just get busier. So instead you have to zoom out and get a different perspective and ask, what does your heart say? So I would ask you, what question are you living in? What does your heart say? And we were at Kripalu, and Kripalu is a yoga and retreat center. I recommend everybody go there because it's a great rejuvenator. And we were asked to pair up with somebody that we hadn't met yet in the group. And this beautiful woman, Leah from Israel, approached me and asked me if I would partner with her. And the question that we were supposed to answer for each other was, what's your favorite place on earth? And Leah talked about the back patio in Israel where she watched the sunset. And she said she was going to go back to her home and watch the sunset every day because that made her day better. And it seemed so lovely. And then she asked me, what was my favorite place on earth? And my favorite place on earth is Maine, specifically Little Sebago Lake in Maine. Ever since my 23-year-old son was 5, I take 2 weeks a year vacation religiously. And it's not just Maine. It's the second Sunday night of my vacation, when I've come down from that week of work and I'm finally relaxed, and I have a week to go. That moment, when I'm watching my kids come out of the water for dinner, that moment is my favorite place on earth. And she said to me, Kelly, you have to find a way to bring Maine home. And I wrote it down, how can I bring Maine home? But like they say in Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, sometimes the truth comes knocking, and you tell it to go away, because you're busy looking for the truth. How can I bring Maine home? And I thought, that's the question I need to be living in. I need to bring Maine home when I walk through the door at night after a long day of work, and I need to bring Maine home as I go into the office in the morning. Because then I'm there, and I'm relaxed. And I want to tell you how I did it. But this isn't a how-to, because I don't believe how-tos work. You see somebody that looks great, and they lost 20 pounds, you're automatic, how did you do it? And they'll tell you how they did it, but it's probably not going to work for you. And the reason why it won't work for you is because it's about practice. In order to change your behavior, you have to practice. Our brains are plastic, and you can only build a new neuronal pathway and create a new behavior if you practice something every day. You might practice it for, there are different theories, 21 days, 28 days. At Kripalu, we picked 30, and we did 30-day challenges in order to change our behavior, and I'll share more about that. And this is why years of New Year's resolutions gave me nothing more than a great January. I had the same 6 resolutions every year: be present, have more patience, eat better, go to sleep, work out. Sound familiar? They're everybody's resolutions. And I would get to the end of January, and I would say, oh my God, all I want is a bottle of wine and a hunk of cheese, and I want to watch Criminal Minds until 3 in the morning, and I don't give a shit if I'm tired tomorrow. Right? Because I wasn't practicing. I was trying to get there without doing the work. Positive psychology is the study of who we are at our best. But in order to know who we are at our best, you have to do some work, and you have to have a goal. So in order to do the practice, you have to have a goal. So now I'm going to make you do some work. I want you to bring to mind somebody that you admire. What is it about that person that you admire? I want you to think about that person, and I want you to write down their traits. And then I'm going to ask you to share the story of the person that you admire with the person sitting next to you. So I'll share my story. And while you're listening to my story, you might jot down some things you hear about the people that I admire. So the people that I admire most in my life are my parents. For you, it could be a grandmother, somebody you work with, your daughter, your son. But for me, it's my parents. When I was a little girl, I had a sister named Shauna. When she was 8 months old, she was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, which for those of you who might not know is a genetic disease of the lungs and pancreas. And she was very ill. And there's a lot we can do now, but in 1967, there wasn't much to be done. And my mother's dreams of having a huge family died in that diagnosis. And my father went from the office where they got the diagnosis to the office where he got a vasectomy, because he didn't want to have any more children with a genetic disease. And my mother looked at adopting. And the woman said to her, well, it's going to be about 7 years. She said, why? There are so many kids. And she said, well, I assume you want a white child with blue eyes, just like your daughter. She said, no, I just want kids. She said, oh, well, check non-white then, and it'll happen faster. And I'm the oldest of 6. That's my story. Everybody's family is built differently. That's how mine was built. So you may have heard me talk about my mother's adaptability, my father's decisiveness, and all of the love. So I want you to think about who you admire. I usually do this in like 8 minutes, but we're going to do it in a little shorter amount of time. So think about who you admire. Write down their traits. I'll give you a minute to do it, and then I'll give you a minute to share, and then you get to switch partners and share. So, who do you admire? Okay, we're going to share. So, David Isay of StoryCorps says that there's nothing more important than being heard in your own story. So I know it's really hard for me to ask you to do this in a minute, because a lot of times a lot of emotion comes up when you're sharing the story of who you admire. But if you would partner up and share with the person next to you the story of who you admire, and the listener's job is to write down what they hear. What are those traits that that person admires? And then we'll switch. So now I want you to look at your list. You might have 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 words that I want you to circle the ones that resonate most for you. When you look at all of those traits, from the story you told or the story you heard, what are the 5 or 6 traits that resonate most for you? Circle them. So now you have your list. And I want you to write I am in front of each one of those words. So if you wrote courageous, I want you to write I am courageous. So now you have your list. This is the beginning of who you are. It's very hard to tell somebody what your best traits are. But it turns out that the things you admire most in the people that you love are the things that you admire most about yourself. This is who you are at your core. Who you were before the world started to influence you. before well-meaning and sometimes not well-meaning people put limitations on you by saying things like, "You're so funny." And then you thought, "I have to be funny all the time." Or, "You're super mom." Something I hate to hear, because then I feel like I have to be super mom all the time. So then you develop this fear of being found out, like, what if I'm not super mom? What if I suck that day? Are people still going to love me? And then you build a facade around all of that, what we in this room would call a brand, which we do so well for our clients. We need to be very careful of for ourselves. This is the work of Tal Ben-Shahar, who taught at Harvard, who taught me the certificate program in positive psychology. And the exercise that we just did, he developed because the only way to get back to your core is to cut through all of that by reflecting what you know about somebody else. So here's mine. I am open. I have traditions. I'm a positive force. I use my influence for good. I am able to change. I am grateful. I am a listener. I am myself always. And I am courageous. And when I say I am courageous, I also say I am honest and gentle with myself, and I will do no harm. And my friend Judy says, "Bullshit." "Bullshit, you are the hardest person on yourself that I know." And I said, "Oh yeah, I know. I forgot. This is who I am on my best day." And so we left Kripalu with this core self, and we did 30 days of reading that core self every day. Because reflecting on who you are at your best self every morning sets you up with a really healthy self-image as you start your day. So that was the first 30-day exercise that we did. The next 30-day exercise that we did together was 30 days of gratitude. Then we did 30 days of what am I looking forward to. And I started to see some patterns. And then I did 30 days of good enough, because I am a recovering perfectionist. And I need to practice that good enough is okay. Otherwise, I'm always going to try to be a perfectionist. And then I did 30 days of showing up for myself. And I started to feel selfish because I was saying no to things that didn't serve me. I was saying no to things that didn't fit that description of who I wanted to bring into the world. And I saw Cindy Gallop speak at Cannes around this time when I was doing the 30 days of showing up for myself. And she talked about a micro action that we can take as women in the workforce. And she said, women should not do the housekeeping at work. And I said, I am going to show up for myself by not doing the housekeeping at work. And so I think about how you all are going to leave the 3% conference, and when we come to these things, we feel so empowered and excited when we leave. And Peter Drucker, the management consultant, says, don't call me on Monday and tell me how great it was. Call me on Monday and tell me, what are you going to do differently because of what you learned? And so I challenge you to think about what 30-day challenge can you do that will help change your behavior, that will help you stop doing the housekeeping at work if that's what you do. So I realized I was being self-full, not self-foot, not selfish, because when you are bringing your true, authentic, core self into the world, it's better for everyone, not just you. So let's get to the whittling. Everybody needs a truth teller in their lives, a friend that tells them the truth no matter what. Mine is Judy. I've already mentioned her. And all year long, I was talking about how I was whittling away the things that didn't matter so I could focus on what did. And I kept calling it my year of whittling. And she sent me an email one day that said, you got to stop talking about whittling because you don't know anything about it. And here's a book I think you should buy. And I read the book, and I realized that I actually was whittling. And I want to offer a scaffolding for how you can whittle, but it's not a how-to, you have to do the work. So the first thing you do in whittling is you prepare the blank. The blank is that piece of wood that you find when you're walking through the forest or on your hiking meeting. The blank is the piece of wood you buy in the store. And only you can see the vision in the blank. And the coolest thing about whittling is that you chip, 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 chip away slowly, and suddenly you emerge. Prepare the blank. You started today. You have your I am statements. You could reflect on them every day. That's how I prepared the blank. That's who I wanted to be on my best day. The next thing you do in whittling is you choose the right knife, the right tool. It turns out in whittling you don't need a lot of fancy knives. You just need one really sharp knife. And there were a lot of tools we learned about during our year, and I tried them all. A lot of people do yoga. I can't do a downward dog. A lot of people work out. I already told you about my criminal minds obsession. And a lot of people meditate, and I cannot meditate. I've tried it. But I walk every day. Sometimes at 9 o'clock at night, but I walk every day. And I read this book, Full Catastrophe Living by John Kabat-Zinn, and in it he says that meditation is paying attention to what you're doing when you're doing it. And I realized that walking was my meditation. Walking every day was my tool. So now I had my core, I had my blank, and I had my tool. And the next thing you do in whittling is you center the blade. So in whittling, if your blade isn't centered, you lose your leverage and you reduce your power. That's a huge metaphor for us. If you're not centered, you reduce your power. So how important is it to stay centered, and how do I get centered? So for me, the way that I got centered was that through those 30-day challenges, I realized that what it was giving me was this gift of the ability to savor the moment at the end of the day. At the end of each day, I could reflect back on what that best moment was. And as I savored that moment, it helped me get centered. And the best story I know about savoring the moment is from Rebecca Soni. She's a gold-winning Olympic medalist in the breaststroke. And she describes her gold medal winning race this way. Swim, 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 touch. Swim, 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 touch. Swim, 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 touch. Swim, 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 touch. Looks up, world record. Everybody's cheering. They whip her out of the pool, and here's a towel, and go through the tunnel, and congratulations, and like, and she gets up on the podium, and the gold medal's around her neck, and the flag goes up, and then it's over. 2 years later, she's at the Winter Olympics, watching a teammate. And she watches him get the gold medal, and she watches the flag go up, and she hears the national anthem. And 2 years later, she felt all of the emotions of what it meant to win a gold medal. And she said, I wish somebody had told me to stay in the pool. We all need to stay in the pool. Center the blade. Savor the moment. The last thing you do in whittling is you work with the grain. This is 2 parts, right? Work, practice, doing something different every day. And with the grain, with your grain. And whittling, if you hit a knot, you're not working with the grain, you can really hurt yourself. And in life, if you're not working with your grain, you can really hurt yourself. So 2 years ago, when I told you in my little story, I did the VIA strength exercise. You can do it online through the UPenn website. And it'll give you your 24 strengths in rank order. My first strength is the capacity to love and be loved. Then comes zest and enthusiasm, then gratitude, then kindness, then humor. Creativity was in the top 10, but it wasn't my top 5. And I thought, well, no wonder I'm so unhappy at work. What does the capacity to love and be loved have to do with working at Bank of America? And then I decided that I was unhappy because I wasn't bringing my true self to work anymore. I needed to work with my grain. And so I brought myself back to work. I had this great woman at Bank of America say to me during that time, I want you to get your swagger back. This is not working for you, this I'm so unhappy thing. I needed to bring myself back to work. So at the end of it all, At the end of my year of whittling, I realized that I am the solution for me. And I would offer to you that you are the solution for you. Look, most of us don't have a capital M meaning in our lives. It's our jobs to make the ordinary extraordinary. There's one Malala. There's one Kat Gordon, thank goodness. But there's also one Liz Sobel and one Kate Carr-Connors. I am the solution for me. Thank you.